Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Mazza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to listen in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world and beyond. And remember to subscribe. This is really fun conversations. And today, I'm really happy to have one and only, and someone I've listened to for many years, and of course he knows everybody's been listening for years, Chris Parker. Thank you, Chris, for joining me on this.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, no, it's great that, after all of these years and all those tracks and records I heard you on way back. But before we talk about that, in shaping your journey, in your particular journey, and you certainly had an interesting one. Before we go on with it, what was the first thing that sparked you? What started your fire?
Oh, that's a tough question. That's a good question. But if I go back to my earliest memories, it's playing along to records, where my father was a painter, but he also played drums. He played soprano sax. He loved music and always had music going in the house. And he had a rudimentary drum set up. That's the first thing I remember, a big bass drum and a Black Beauty snare drum and a China cymbal and I forget the other details, some Chinese tom-toms and stuff like that. And my biggest thrill when I was a little kid was to play along with these records. And I played along with Count Basie and Lionel Hampton and Benny Goodman and Duke Ellington and Monk records and Miles records, any chance I could get. And he made a recording at one point. He used to be able to make a reel-to-reel recording and then take it to Grand Central and have them take the quarter-inch recording and turn it into a disc. So I have this disc of me playing along with Flying Home and Gin for Christmas, these two Lionel Hampton tracks.
Wow.
And I'm just, banging away, but I was having a ball. And that definitely is when the fire started. That's, I couldn't put the words together then. I was 2.5 or 3, I guess. But I knew in my heart that's what I wanted to do for a living and wanted to do for the rest of my life, because nothing gave me that feeling like playing along and being a part of the band. And so that was my ambition, to be on recordings and to play with great players and be in that scene.
And back then, I'm sure there was so much going on around. I remember also there was so much going on that you're looking up and around all the time. So it must have been amazing, especially in New York, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Too much. I was reading about you, and it's funny because Woodstock came up, and it's been coming up a lot for me recently. I say this because I had Ciro Baptista on, who's a great friend, and he came to Kosa camps, and he came from Brazil to Woodstock and went to that camp, that workshop that they had, the creative workshop. In there,
Carl
and it's
Berger,
funny,
right?
Yeah, Carl Berger. And the funny part of it is funny, and it's funny. I had applied to go, and I was going to go, and I think that was the early '80s or late '70s, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was going to everything that moved, every camp I can get my hands on. And I started going to New York, studying with people in New York, hanging out in New York, meeting everybody from Steve Gadd to everybody, and that was one camp I wanted to go to, one of two that I missed, just because I got so busy and I was touring with the world with my group all of a sudden, and I missed it. And then all of a sudden, all of these people show up who went there, and I missed. We could have all met.
Yeah.
But you were there.
I was in Woodstock from late 69 or so until about 1974, 75. But Carl Berger was around, and Jack DeJohnette was around, and of course Levon Helm was around.
Yes.
Billy Mundy, another great drummer who played with Frank Zappa. There was a bunch of cats who lived up there, and it was a '69 was the year of the, or was it '68? I forget when the festival was. I didn't go to the festival, but after the festival, that town, because of brand confusion, name confusion, all these musicians gravitated towards the town. And it was an artist colony anyway, but there was no actual studio there until Albert Grossman built Bearsville Studios. And that was almost the first official recording studio. And that was early '70s. So, but Carl Berger was definitely on the scene, and Dave Holland was around there. And
exactly.
A lot of names that I recognized, from the jazz world: Anthony Braxton and Steve Lacy and Steve Swallow, and
wow, that's right. Yeah,
a lot of folks came through that camp or came to play with Carl Berger, and we met a couple of times in passing in Woodstock, but I wasn't part of that scene. I was kind of part of another scene.
Okay, is that where the group's Stuff was born?
Stuff was born in New York City, 97th and Columbus. McKell's was the famous club. Pat and Mike McKell owned. That was a jazz club. Art Blakey played there, Roy Haynes played there, Chico Hamilton, Art Farmer, Billy Higgins. A lot of jazz acts played there, and Stuff was initially called the Encyclopedias of Soul, and it was Gordon Edwards and Richard T. and Cornell Dupree, and they had various drummers.
Sorry, was Eric Gale in the band at the time?
He joined once we were sort of established. Eric came and Steve came.
Steve Gadd.
Yeah, and Pat and Mike McKell gave us the off nights. The jazz acts would do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night was a kind of quiet night, and Monday night was a kind of a quiet night. So she let us, Gordon Edwards and us, have those quiet nights, and that's kind of how the band came together. We had all this time and 4 sets starting at 10, until 2 or 3 in the morning to play whatever we wanted, and we came up with all these arrangements of tunes on the radio, whatever we heard on the jukebox. And Cornell had a record out called Teasin'. Richard T. had a bunch of records out. Gordon was on all these different records, and we would play things that they had recorded that day or something that we liked on the jukebox, an Earth, Wind and Fire tune or a Stevie Wonder tune or Brooke Benton, whatever we heard. But a lot of times, one of those guys, Richard or Cornell or Gordon, had played on the track, so they knew the arrangement.
Nice. Well, for those who don't know, I mean, the group Stuff was like, I have to say, it was like all the guys were doing all the records in those days. And I was spending a lot of time in New York, learning from everybody. And actually, I hung out with Steve Gadd a lot. And I got to know who was doing what. And I would show up at sessions. I would be invited and just be a fly on the wall sometimes and just learn, the way it was done in New York. So I took that knowledge with me as a big learning possibility for me. But what was really interesting is, like, you guys had Stuff, like, what was the band, and of everybody. And I used to say to myself, like, where do they find the time to put a band together? They're all in the studio day and night at the time, right?
Well, when the studio jobs ended, that's where we went to let off steam. After getting out of the studio, let's go up and play. And we had that opportunity, and as the band coalesced and became more popular, Pat and Mike started to give us the jazz nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or 2 weeks in a row, 14 days straight. So that's a great opportunity. I don't think it happens that often these days. Some people, you see their booking, it says in residence, or a residency where they get to do a week or they get to do 2 weeks. But we got to do as many open nights as there were. Okay, Roy Haynes is not here. Art Blakey's not here. Let's bring the band in and have
Right.
a place to play and leave the gear set up and play whatever we want.
Beautiful.
So that was a
Was
great opportunity. Really grateful for that.
Were you part of that group? I mean, there was a club I remember really well, Possible 20.
Sure.
There was a club, and it was actually, then I learned at the time that there was actually 20 people who got involved in it, studio guys,
Right.
and the Possible 20 was the guys owning the club, right? The
Yep.
venue. So what's the story behind that?
Well, Possible 20 is what they say on a jingle booking. It's 10 to 11 with a possible 20, meaning you can't leave. If we're done at 11 o'clock, that's great. You can leave, but you might not be done at 11 o'clock. There might be another 20 minutes while they mess around with the track and, add a bridge, add a couple of notes here and there. So Possible 20 became the name of it. And it was 20 guys who were all kind of in a circle, studio guys. I don't have the list in front of me, but guys who were around
Yes.
Midtown all the time and often had time between dates. Okay, I got a 9 to 10, a 11 to 12, I got a 1 to 2. And you don't want to go home before the next date. So you need a place to hang out where there's a phone and you can get some food and hang with the guys before you go to the next studio, wherever that was. But it was 55th between 8th and Broadway. So it was a very central location and a great place to hang out until the next date.
Yeah. I mean, some incredible music was happening at that time. And of course, all the records that we listened to from that era, just the groove was just amazing what you guys were able to do and teach us. But I mean, you were part of the Brecker Brothers original band, right?
Yep.
And did that start at the Possible 20 or was it around
that? I was in Woodstock and I moved into a building on Carmine Street that had Will Lee on the ground floor. It had Don Grolnick, great keyboardist, on the 4th floor. There was a singer who lived on the 2nd floor and a saxophone player who lived on another floor. So a very musical building. And Will Lee was the one who told me that there was an apartment available. Why don't you move into New York? So I came in from Woodstock and moved into that building. And Steve Gadd, great guitarist, lived on 21st and 7th, I think. He was kind of in the neighborhood. So Will, myself, Don Grolnick, and Steve Gadd would rehearse in Don Grolnick's apartment, which was a 1-bedroom apartment. We were really on top of each other. That band was called the Carmine Street Band or something. We played at McKell's a couple of times. And it was fun. We played Don's tunes, instrumentals and stuff. I forget what else. But first Randy heard that we were playing there. And then Mike said, let me come over and jam. And Randy had written all this really tough music for an album that he wanted to do, but he couldn't get anybody to sign on with him. But he met a guy at Arista, Steve Backer, who said, if you call it the Brecker Brothers, I'll get you a record deal. So that was like the incentive to do it. And then Mike Brecker and Sanborn were friends, and they told Sanborn to come. So then it was Mike and Randy and Sanborn horns, and that rhythm section, Don Grolnick, me, Will, and Steve Gadd. That's how the Brecker Brothers formed. Nice. And Randy did the first album, but Harvey Mason played on most of the tracks because it was beyond my reading ability. But I did all the tours and stuff, playing. I woodshedded those tunes, Sponge and Creatures of Many Faces, and there was a lot of tough stuff that Randy had written, tough for me. So they used Harvey Mason on the record, where he played great. I just saw him in Japan last year. Love that guy. Yeah, and then we did another album, Back to Back, which is kind of the most famous album that's got all the new tunes that Randy wrote.
That some skunk funk was on that.
Skunk Funk was on that first record, yeah.
Okay.
With Harvey Mason played. He's the original. He played the original track, but I played Skunk Funk probably 2,000 times since then. I know it by heart. That's a great one. That's his most famous. I've heard marching band arrangements of Skunk Funk. I've heard big band arrangements. I've heard, trio arrangements. I've heard like a country version of Skunk Funk.
Country version of Skunk
Very
Funk.
adaptable tune.
Yeah, that was a great tune. I remember that takes me back. I went to a camp once, a 3-week jazz thing at Banff here in Canada. And Dave Holland was the artistic director.
Okay.
And one of the faculty people, I forget who the drum guy was. I don't remember now, but it was John Abercrombie was doing guitar there. So each one of us were composing. It was playing and a composition thing. So I wrote so much stuff, and then but at the end they asked each one of us to do a performance of what we composed or what we were working on during that time. So I decided to do Skunk Funk.
Great.
As part of my finale, my own thing there, and John Abercrombie joined me on the tune.
Great.
Which I mean, that was my hit that night.
Great.
It was great. Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, I mean, I can't imagine like being with those guys like day and night. It's insanity. Musical.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of good music and a lot of great hangs and a lot of wild traveling, and that was a great band.
Yeah, yeah. And you went on, I mean, you did a lot of work with other people like James Brown, you did some Miles Davis. I mean, I can go on, and the names that come to mind of people you recorded with and worked with in New York.
I've been very, very lucky. Yep.
What was that? I mean, you recorded with James Brown any specific tunes that you remember?
Yes, it's called Get Up Off of That Thing, which had already been recorded once with his regular drummer, Melvin Parker. And I recorded, Will and I had just been on Esther Phillips' What a Difference a Day Makes, which was like a hit. I forget what year. But so we were like known for that track. And they wanted to recut, James Brown wanted to recut Get Up Off of That Thing with more of that kind of feeling. So we did it separately. They had the drums and then they added bass later on. But if you listen to part 2 of Get Up Off of That Thing, it's part 1 and part 2, you can hear James Brown asking, we got the drums. And so he said, Parker. And because it was Melvin Parker on the original, I think that's what everybody assumed, that it's Melvin Parker, same last name.
Right, right. That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that one.
Nice. It's funny because James Brown was one too. I had the good fortune to work with James Brown, but live. I was playing percussion, and it was funny because it was a short thing, but it was what an experience that was, because everything we rehearsed, and you can back me up on this. Everything we rehearsed, he says, I'm going to end this tune this way. I'm going to say this ha 3 times, and so we're all taking note, and then for the first show, I remember. Nothing he said he was doing. So we were all looking. I remember that first concert. I remember and this was a live TV show.
Yeah.
So we're all looking at each other, and you could see everybody's antennas rising very high because we were all looking. Okay, how are we going to end this? And
you got to keep your eye on James. Yeah.
And then it would end. It would be beautiful. Okay. Then we said, okay, now the next one, same thing. So it was always like that, right?
Yep.
What an experience. And then I learned something really amazing, because when you hear the records, like Take It to the Bridge and all of that stuff, what he would say, that's not the part of the text. That's actually, he's directing the band, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
That's funny. But I think it's so much more fun that way when you're like playing by the seat of your pants. Everybody is on.
Yep.
And it's total performance at the moment. It's like a conversation that you're not going to have again, right?
That's right. That's right.
Wow, and I think that's the way to do it. Was Miles like that too?
Miles wasn't in the studio. I overdubbed drums on an existing track, and
Okay.
I listened to 7 different trumpet solos, trying to figure out what would be good here and what would be good there. And the producer was Dr. George Butler and Jimmy Simpson, and they kept saying, just make it simpler, make it simpler, make it simpler. So the tune is called Shout. And Vince Wilburn, a great friend of mine, played on the original track, and then they added my drum. So he wasn't actually in the studio. I was just overdubbing on this existing track. But it was an experience I'll never forget. I got the call at midnight, can you come to the studio? We got to do Miles Davis.
Wow, that's nice.
Very exciting.
And you also worked with people like Aretha Franklin.
Yep.
And was that recording or live?
One of each.
Okay.
Live, it was a concert, a benefit concert for ophthalmologists or something. I can't remember exactly what. But Luciano Pavarotti was supposed to be the main singer, and we had rehearsed with him and everything. And at the last minute, he got ill. And they said, well, we need a sub. And they got Aretha to sing Nessun Dorma, which is a really tough piece. And she sang that live. There's no great drum part on it. It's mainly, cymbal rolls, mallet cymbal rolls and stuff going with her vocal. But I did record with her on a record called La Diva, which is, I don't know, not even my favorite Aretha Franklin record. There's some good tracks on there, a couple of good things. But again, she wasn't in the studio. She didn't want to fly she never wanted to fly, but she didn't even want to take the train from Detroit. So a woman named Zulima did the scratch vocals, and we were kind of doing the session with her. So it wasn't like being in Muscle Shoals and having Aretha really interacting. But
right.
it's a credit.
Yes,
I put Aretha Franklin on La Diva. So, and that was basically stuff. Gordon Edwards and Richard T. and Cornell and Eric Gale. I think everybody was on it.
Okay, was that the same thing with the Quincy Jones stuff that you did?
Quincy Jones stuff I did a lot on the soundtrack for The Wiz, and I did stuff with Patty Austin that Quincy produced. But stuff like that was Steve and Anthony Jackson and Richard T. They just sort of cherry picked the band, and substituted the bass player, and I think Eric is on it too. That happened a lot. Artists would come and hear the band at McKell's and love the band, but I only need one drummer. I only need one guitar player.
Right.
Richard T. got on everything. Everybody wanted Richard T., for his sound, the Rhodes sound with the small stone phaser and his acoustic playing too, So, but often people would say, well, I'll take Cornell and Chris and Gordon. And somebody else would say, well, I'll take Eric and Richard and Steve, like Paul Simon, took those guys away. And it was great for them that they were all working that much, but it was not detrimental, but it kind of slowed the momentum of the band's stuff. 2 drummers, 2 guitar players, piano and bass was a thing. And a lot of times we couldn't do the next tour because not everybody was available. And there was a lot of gigs where it was just Steve or just me, or it was just Cornell. That happened, unfortunately, but it was the nature of the popularity and the viability of all the other players. They were in demand. So, and everybody's got to put bread on the table.
Yeah. But you guys did record stuff. I remember I have at least one album that I'm seeing the word stuff on the album. I still have it. Did you do more than one album with the band?
We did 4 albums with that band. That first one that you're imagining with the red cover.
Yeah.
Then there's one called More Stuff. Then there's one called Stuff It. Then there's one called Live in New York, which was recorded at McKell's.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of Japanese issues, one where I couldn't make the tour, so it's just Steve. And a lot of videos and stuff from Japan, and a lot of bootleg where people, recorded the band at McKell's, or they recorded the band at a concert in Japan and then put that out as a CD. There's a lot. When you go to Japan, can't believe how many stuff records there are. Not only those 4 that I mentioned, but probably another 5 or 6 bootlegs from live recordings.
Yeah. Well, the band was so tight and so amazing what you guys were doing. It looks simple. I mean, it was deceptively simple because, to groove like that, I mean, you had to really be on the track. And the question is, when you have 2 drummers, I mean, like you and Steve, did you work out parts, or did you just play and the other one just figured it out?
We never, not once did we ever discuss, well, I'm going to play cross stick up until the bridge, and then I'll go to the bell of the cymbal, and then you go back to 16ths on the hi-hat, and then we'll make the bass drum, you got the downbeats and I'll play, nothing like that. We never discussed it at all. We just set up and played and played from our hearts and played what the song needed, and not much else, and lots of times you can see on the Saturday Night Live clips, we're backing up Joe Cocker. We had parts, but we never discussed them. We just listened to each other and played what was appropriate.
Okay. But in a case like that, somebody has to take the lead and then the other one kind of follow, no? Or am I wrong in that? Or who jumps in first and then the other one say, okay, here I am. That what would happen?
Not really.
Okay.
We never, there was never like a lead drummer and a rhythm drummer, or like a lead guitarist and a rhythm guitarist?
No. What I'm saying is not that you would discuss it, because that's clear that what you said. But I'm saying as a call out the tune. So let's play this. As you're jumping in, one has to decide, I'm going to take the lead on this or not. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? Just that moment, somebody has to make a decision, right?
Yeah, but the decisions were simultaneous.
Nice.
I think. I don't remember a time where somebody said, well, you count this one off, or you count this one off, or you got this one, or, Gordon was the leader of the band and everybody kept their eyes on him.
Okay.
And with his, downbeat with the precision bass, or a turn of the head, or a sideways look, he would give you the white eye, looking, those were the cues that I always watched for. He had a very strong body language and certain gestures that he always, the analogy was a football team. He was the quarterback. And once he snapped the ball, it was up to us to do what we were supposed to do, run, catch a pass, block, whatever. He always used that analogy, football team. Everybody's got to do their job. So.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, that's interesting, because that's what it is. I mean, it's an event and it's a play. I mean, you're playing, whether it's football. Yeah. I mean, you're playing music, and it starts in one place, it ends up where it ends up, and you don't know where it's going to end up, right? That's interesting.
We never did.
It's a beautiful analogy, actually, when you're thinking about it, and that's live. I mean, I shouldn't say live. That's alive, right?
Yeah.
What a difference it makes when everybody is on, and I mean the body language, and you said something really interesting there, because I always tell my students or anybody I play with, it's your eyes. You have to have eye contact, not just ear contact. That's obvious, but the eye contact will shape where things go.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And if somebody, you can be sad, you can be happy, you can be. It's like the conductor in the band or in the orchestra.
Yeah, definitely.
That same projection of attitude or mood or the mindset that we're in that moment, and that can change, of course. Yeah, no, that's interesting. You also worked with Freddie Hubbard,
Yeah.
What records did you play on that?
The record
With
is
him.
called Windjammer.
Ah,
And
I
it
love
was,
that album. That's right. I love that album.
it's a good record. Bob James on keyboards. Steve Kahn is on that as well. And Gary King, great bass player who passed away a couple of years ago. Um, and there's horns and strings, I guess, on. Oh, and Ralph McDonald is on there
Yes.
too. Great percussionist who was in my band, Kofi and the Pussycats.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a fun project. And Freddie, you know, consummate musician. He was great. I mean, he's unique. He's totally recognizable as much as Miles or Art Farmer or Roy Eldridge or Bunny Berrigan, you know, Harry James. He's got his own style and his tunes are beautiful.
Right. And that was during the whole CTI period, right?
Well, this was for CBS Records, but yeah,
Okay.
same period, CTI period, where Bob James was doing a lot of arranging and Creed Taylor was putting out great products, you know, one after another, great album covers and everything recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's studio, which was immaculate. That was a great place to work.
Right. And having Ralph McDonald, I know Ralph McDonald's work. I used to like Steve Gadd and Ralph McDonald as a drummer and percussionist, because I was the two people, I was doing a lot of work in both areas. So we would analyze Ralph McDonald to death. What was he doing? How did he do that? All these simple things, well, it's really not that simple, but so tasty, so tasteful.
Yep.
And in fact, with Ralph McDonald, we had a percussion group at the university called Concept Neuf. We were 9 percussionists.
Wow.
And at one point, we went down to New York with our teacher, who was the leader of the group, and we asked him, because we wanted to record. We did an arrangement of "The Path," his song "The Path." Okay,
Great.
So we did an arrangement completely percussion. We're 9 percussionists, so we went down. As we were working, we wanted to do this, so we asked Ralph when he had his office on Broadway, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and,
Rosebud Studios. Yeah.
Yes, and he gave us the music to work with, what he had. So we actually released that album, and it was a hit, all percussion.
Wow, great!
So it was our claim to fame of, repeating what Ralph McDonald invented in the studios. I mean, he must have been amazing to work with live, right, or in the studio.
He was. We had a lot of fun. And he came up with a lot of instruments on his own, that he doesn't get credit for. Like in years past, the phone connections for office buildings were these very thick cables that had a big connector, probably 6 inches long, all these pins and stuff like that, wrapped in aluminum, but solid rubber and a rubber-coated cable. He put 2 of those together and made a thing that was like this giant castanet, maybe, or he used it for a lot of things. And him and Martin Cohen from LP Percussion, came up with a lot of great improvements, like Vibra-Slap, instead of being a jackass jaw, they made it an actual thing, Vibra-Slap. He used to play these plastic hammers that you would get at a carnival. They have a little whistle, and he play those on his head, and totally musical. It was just the right part. But anything he played, he had little tiny bells or little tiny trinkets and stuff that he would play, and he always picked the right thing for the right record. Genius of a guy, and great songwriter.
Yes.
And I don't know if you ever heard the story, how he started. He was the dancer.
I didn't know he was a dancer. Okay, I knew he was a percussionist for Harry, but not a dancer. Okay, that's new.
He was a dancer first.
Please go on.
He was like 16, and he would come out with bells on his ankles and feathers and a kind of a native costume, and he would do this whole dance thing. And there was a percussionist, I don't know who it was, but he got into trouble one night, and Harry said, "What am I going to do without somebody who can play congas?" And Ralph said, "I could do that." So that was his beginning. That was his start. Harry Belafonte gave him a shot playing congas, He said, never got, the other guy never came back. And Bill Salter was on that band playing bass, and Bill Eaton was the arranger and wrote all these arrangements for Harry Belafonte. So Bill Salter, Ralph, and Bill Eaton became Antasia Music, and wrote all these songs together, just the two of us, and Mr. Magic and Wine Light, and countless others for other people. They became like this triumvirate. These three guys out of Harry Belafonte's band.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
No, Ralph was an absolute genius. We used to analyze what he was doing, and it was all so clear right through any music, and it was all melody. He was playing all these melodies with percussion instruments.
Exactly. It wasn't, soca, and it wasn't songo. It wasn't a fixed Latin pattern, but it had some elements of Latin, and it had some elements of Caribbean, but it was right for the music.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, when you listen, and I still listen to those parts, and anytime we do studio work, it was always, I need a Gadd thing, or I need a Ralph McDonald thing here. It was always, that was the reference. And then I actually saw Ralph in the studio when he was using those hammers. Okay. And I'd heard the sound, so I said, "That's what it is."
Yep.
So I bought some when I went to a toy store, and I'm trying all of these, and these people are looking at me like, should we ask him to leave? I said, no, I'm going to buy these.
Musical instrument. Yeah, he turned it into a musical instrument.
Yeah, he was doing all kinds of great things, and it's not so obvious also. And, and it was always about the melody. It just...
Right.
Amazing, because people would try to do all these technical things, and they're just not necessary. And he had that sound, which was just magic sound, and just the two of us, for example, Grover Washington. I mean, wow, that was just listening to that. He said it's so crystal clear, and cuts right through in the middle, and everything is kind of built around it. Even the voice is built around it.
Yeah. Calypso Breakdown, which is on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, instrumental, is an amazing track. It's got this whole Caribbean story that it tells, in rhythms. That's one of my favorites.
Right. And you're still, talking about, you were on the Saturday Night Live band show band, I should say, right? You're in the band for years, right? How did that was all of this, the connecting factor in all of this is like all of these guys that you're playing with all the time, just promoting or suggesting or saying you should call Chris is the man.
Something like that. I wasn't in the room when they said that, but yeah, somebody would call me and say, "I heard you would be the guy for this," or "Would you be interested in doing this?" And try to always say yes. Saturday Night Live, Steve Ferrone was the drummer, and he got called to do Duran Duran, I think, a big tour with them. So he was leaving, and I got a call from the contractor saying, "Would you be up for doing it?" And I said, "Oh, give it sure." So that's how that started. That was 86, and I did it 86 to 92, which was a great period for the show. A lot of great cast members, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman and Kevin Nealon and Victoria Jackson. There was it was Mary Gross. There was a great, each one of the cast members had really something unique to offer, which was fun. And that period, people would still come as a solo act, like Elvis Costello came, but he didn't bring a band. So the Saturday Night Live band, or a portion of it, would get to play with him, or with Eric Clapton, or with Paul Simon, or with Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville. So Quincy Jones. It was a great opportunity, to play with some of these great artists. I remember working with Leo Sayer. There were some really, nice musical segments that they would each musical artist would get 2 slots, one around midnight and then another one at 12:45 before the show goes out. Now it's the band who made the record or whoever, is a whole finite thing. It's not, as far as I know, I don't know. Sean Pelton may play with some of the people who come on the show, but that used to happen a lot. We've got so-and-so coming in and we need bass, drums, guitar, and keyboards. Okay, so we rehearsed with them during the week and then play it on air.
Nice. That's beautiful.
Eddie Van Halen was a great one. He happened to come with his wife then, Valerie Bertinelli. So we got Eddie, you got to sit in with the band, man. And that was really fun. He's a great guitarist.
Yes, sir. And it was usually on the fly. They'd say, "Yeah, let's do this," right?
Yeah.
Nice. And I remember I just had a flash. There was a show. I don't know what the name of it was. I'm good friends with Lou Marini, and he had started doing a TV show, and he invited me to the premiere or something. I'm just remembering this here off the cuff, and I think you were the drummer on that show.
I wonder what that was.
Was it? It was one of these shows that I'm not sure now. It's way back. As he was doing this TV show, but it lasted just a short time. Maybe I'm mixing up with another show. But was that the only show you did? The Saturday Night Live TV show?
That's the only, yeah. I mean, we did a special or 2 specials maybe with Chevy Chase.
Okay.
After Chevy Chase had left the cast, I forget how that happened, but we did an NBC special with him. And we did, some of the guys in Saturday Night Live did the Emmy Awards one year. But that was the only night show that I was on. I'm wondering, the Lou Marini thing, maybe that was a talk show like Joan Rivers or...
Maybe it was.
There were a bunch of different talk shows for a while, not just Johnny Carson, but and Letterman, but Arsenio Hall had a show with Terry Lynn Carrington on drums.
Right.
David Brenner had a show with Andy Newmark on drums.
Oh, I think that's the show. David
show Brenner.
I'm thinking of. Yeah. Newmark, yeah. For some reason I thought it was you, but it was
Andy Newmark, one of my favorites.
And another one, and there's so many great drummers in New York, and I got a chance to see Alan Schwartzberg. He's another one, and he used to invite me to a lot of the recordings. I remember one day he calls me and he says, "Aldo, you're in town, right? I'm doing this recording. You got to come to this one." It was John Denver with Placido Domingo when they did Perhaps Love, right? And so of course, it was a Sunday morning or something like that. So I ran down to the studio, and I'm a fly on the wall, and listening. And they did this completely off the floor, one take, And I'm just and Alan he was playing brushes on this. The room was just the studio just lifted with those guys in the room. And I'll never forget that. And I'm in the control room when they came back to listen, and Placido Domingo looks over at me and asks me, he says, "What do you think?" And I'm saying, "What do I think?" So I couldn't really answer, so I just looked at my hand and I said, I pulled my hair up and I went, "That's what I think." They had a good laugh. Good. I said, "What am I going to say?" That was amazing. It was so powerful. And those guys, they meant it, right? When they sang.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful voices.
Wow. Anyway, but now you're still doing studio work. What are you up to these days?
Well, I have my own trio, which has got a great pianist, Kyoko Oyobe, great bassist, Amin Salim, or sometimes Michael O'Brien. And I just added a guitar player, Yuto Kanazawa. And we started our next album. We did 7 tracks so far. We're going to do another 4 tracks June 6th. And great engineer, Elliot Shiner, is going to record it. and looking forward to that. I've been writing for that, a lot of new compositions and new arrangements of
Nice.
tunes that I always wanted to record. Um, so that's a big project, and I'm focusing on that. We play live around New York and other places up in uh, Columbia County or Greene County. Travel a little bit outside of New York to play. And that's there's another band called East Coast Meeting that we just got another gig uh, up where I grew up, actually, Brewster, New York, at a new place called Uncle Chief's, which I haven't played at, but I've heard great things about it. And I think it's the tenor sax player who plays with Colbert Band, maybe Stephen
Okay.
Colbert show. Um, but that band is a great singer, Dennis Collins, and Bill Heller is the keyboard player, Keith Robinson on guitar, and Ruben Rodriguez, great bass player, and David Mann, who was also in my Trophy and the Pussycats band a couple of years ago. So that's like we do a couple of instrumentals, some of my tunes, some of Bill's tunes, and then Dennis sings a couple of Donny Hathaway tunes, Marvin Gaye tunes. That's a really nice band. That's another ongoing
Beautiful.
project. I'm trying to get those guys in the studio. Let's make a record.
Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, the nice thing to see is that you're still playing. I mean, after so many years, you still have this thirst. I mean, we all have. I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean, so I'm
Yeah,
glad to see that you're not just so I've done it. No, man. There's so much more to do.
yeah. Always more to learn and always more to do.
And what would be the one thing I shouldn't say one thing, some of the mindset things that have kept you going all of these years that these years in your world, especially that the whole New York creative scene, and being able to stay sane in front of it and still love doing it. What would you say to the guys who are thinking about it now and playing?
Guys who are thinking about it now and playing, the mindset to me is uh, first and first and foremost, you have to have the desire to want to do it. If you don't have the desire, and I mean strong desire, like you would die if you don't do it. Uh, it's like breathing air. If you couldn't
Right.
breathe air, if I couldn't play music, I would die. So that's that kind of desire, and not it's more than ambition. It's a real commitment to trying to put yourself at this level uh, of enlightenment and of involvement and of artistic creation. If you don't have that kind of aspiration, I would say keep playing and enjoy it for as long as you enjoy it. But nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But for me, it really is like something that, as I started out telling, when I was a little kid, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be in that studio. I want to be playing with these guys. In fact, I did do a record with Lionel Hampton finally in the 80s, and he was great.
Wow. Proud.
He was
Yeah.
great. We had a great time. But
That,
uh, staying healthy and practicing, because there's always more to learn, not just drums and technique, but music. There's all kinds of music out there that's whenever I hear something new, I'm fascinated. I just discovered a pianist named Louis Moreau Gottschalk that a friend who was the road manager with Dylan for many years turned me on to. Did you ever hear about this guy? And no, and he told me about his biography, so I got that and read it. This is a guy, pianist and composer, who in 1860 toured the world with acoustic pianos. He went all over, and this is, steamships and no tour buses and no telephones and but he did it. And the compositions are beautiful. Before Scott Joplin, before Louis Armstrong, this guy was writing these syncopated melodies and harmonic explorations that predate a lot of jazz. And I'm
Wow.
hearing this stuff and I'm saying, this can't be from 1860. This can't be from 1880. This music is
Wow.
so modern. And the syncopation, he had a Haitian, I think his father was Jewish and his mother was Haitian. And he had a nanny from St. Vincent. I have to go back to the book and I'm not sure on those details, but he had all these disparate influences growing up in New Orleans and the New Orleans music. There
Sure.
were street bands and all kinds of music going on in New Orleans, but this was even before that. So
Wow.
I want to record. I picked out two of his tunes and I want to record with the trio, arrange them and record with the trio. Fascinating guy. He ended up in Venezuela, I think, and he was doing these tours where the music is performed by 12 pianists, and he would
12
assemble,
pianists?
12 acoustic pianos on the stage and get all these people to read his. I mean, it must have been incredible. You read some of the reviews, and he took Paris by storm. Nobody could believe this guy from America,
Right.
had all this music in him. So, and I'm sure I love Chopin and Beethoven and Mozart and so many of the classical composers, but this isn't white European classical music. This is music from New Orleans
Right.
that he composed, and it's got its own flavor. I mean, he was definitely aware of Chopin. They're contemporaries,
Sure.
but he took it in another direction, and made it rhythmic and made it syncopated and made it, bass lines going against the melody and stuff. It's incredible. I'm reading,
Interesting.
I got his book of music, transcriptions and reading through it. I can't play like a pianist would play it, but I can figure out the chords and hear the voicings and stuff. And this guy was, it's so unbelievable. You think, did he come from outer space? Is he like such an advanced harmonic knowledge and advanced rhythmic knowledge? It's fascinating. So stuff like that keeps me interested and keeps me eager to go to the next gig or the next practice session or the next recording session or the next tour, to find out what the next musical adventure is going to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Those are really brilliant words. Keeping interested, because that's how you remain interesting by it, right? I mean,
Right.
because then you're refueling all the time and just expanding your horizons. Because if you stay on the one track, it doesn't become interesting after a while. I mean, it's nice, but I mean, being interested in things, then one becomes a lot more interesting and expanding. I mean, just listening to you here now, I want to go in and hear this. I want to see this. So I'm gonna ask you to send it to me, because
Okay.
yeah, no, for sure, this is very interesting, and there's so much stuff out there that there's no way we can know about it until somebody says, did you ever come across this? And of course,
Right.
chances are that there's so much out there that you haven't. So it's important to share these kinds of things.
Yeah.
That could turn people onto the things that would make their lives a lot more interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
Mike Brecker, before he passed away, was into this Bulgarian music of the Shepherds, that was in
Okay.
9 and 11 and 7 and all these melodies. I was hearing him practice, and said, where is this coming from? Completely, European, but Eastern European scales and Eastern European cadences, stuff that was completely unlike the German or the French or the Polish European classical music that we're all familiar with. So he was one of those guys, constantly exploring and going for new heights and new adventures.
Yeah, and it kept him fresh all the time.
Yeah, totally.
And you get up in the morning earlier now because there's so much more to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Well, listen, Chris, I really want to thank you. We could go on for weeks, and then I start pulling things out of you. But maybe we could continue another time. But I really appreciate you taking the time to join us and share, your journey, what you've done, and how things in your part of the world and in your mindset, where it took you. And these kinds of things are really, really important because all of us have different journeys and different variations
Yes,
of those
indeed.
journeys, and every element changes everything. It's like cooking, every element
Right.
will change it, right? So I'm really happy you took the time. I know you're a busy guy, but as I always say, to be continued.
To be continued. We'll do part 2.
Yay. Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thank you.